The heart monitor's steady beep was the only sound in the sterile darkness. Then came the scratching from inside the walls. Not rats, but something deliberate, searching. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and decay, like a storm brewing over a grave. Every wire taped to his chest began to pulse with a faint, sickly light. A whisper slithered from the ventilation grate, words in a language that felt wrong in his bones. He tried to scream, but his throat seized shut, paralyzed by a dread more ancient than fear. The beeping quickened, not from his heart, but from the thing in the walls learning his rhythm, and in that moment, he understood. The machine wasn't saving him. It was teaching something how to wear his skin. Dr. Armitage stared at the x-ray, his face pale in the sterile light. His medical notes lay open, the words, inevitable and terminal, scrawled in frantic red ink. This is the story of John Keller. For 60 days, he was gone, imprisoned in a coma, from which medicine promised no return. But his body was waging a brutal war against itself, a war it could only win through the most horrific act imaginable: self-cannibalism. The backstory. Scene opens. A sunny suburban street in Columbus, Ohio. John, a man in his late 40s, laughs heartily as he grills burgers in his backyard. From the patio, Sarah smiles warmly at the camera, their children playing behind her in the golden hour light. To his neighbors, John Keller was simply the man with the most immaculate lawn on the street. At the engineering firm, colleagues knew him as the reliable, quiet professional, the steady hand everyone trusted. But beneath this ordinary exterior, something else stirred in the shadows of his carefully constructed life. To Sarah and the children, he was their entire world, their unshakable foundation. But then the fissures began to appear in that bedrock. The warmth of their home's filter bled away, replaced by a sterile, clinical blue. A scent of ozone and cold metal crept into the air where familiar smells once lived. The very atmosphere grew dense and still, heavy with a silence that prickled the skin. John sat pale and gaunt in the sterile doctor's office, Sarah clutching his hand until her knuckles blanched white. It began with an unshakable fatigue, a heavy weariness that clung to his bones. Then came the unexplained weight loss, his body wasting away without reason. Finally, the pain arrived, a sharp, persistent ache that settled deep within him. A deep, gnawing ache settled in his gut, unyielding and profound. The diagnosis was brutal: a rare, aggressive sarcoma. Tumors, like grim clusters of withered grapes, were woven through the fabric of his abdomen. Surgery was deemed too perilous a risk. Chemo bought weeks, not months. The fight was brutal. The steady man from the grill vanished, replaced by a gaunt shadow of suffering. And then his body simply surrendered. The steady, rhythmic beat of the heart monitor faltered, then dissolved into a single, unwavering tone. The flatline scream of the machine tore through the room, an electronic death knell. Alarms blared, a cacophony of mechanical panic that filled the sterile air with a sharp scent of ozone. In the eye of that storm, amidst the shouting and the scramble, lay John motionless. For 3 agonizing minutes, John Keller was clinically dead. They revived his body, but his oxygen-starved brain had retreated into a deep, unresponsive coma. The tumors, the doctors murmured in hushed tones, had finally claimed their victory. They told Sarah it was time to discuss end-of-life care, that the man she loved was already gone. Sarah's tear-streaked face filled the screen, defiant in the harsh hospital light. Her voice trembled, yet held iron resolve. Run every test, scan every day. While his heart beats, he's still there. And so the vigil began, a watch kept against the creeping dread. Machines breathed for John, their rhythmic hisses the only life in his hollow shell. Tubes fed him a cold, synthetic sustenance, their plastic surfaces slick with condensation in the chill air. He was a ghost in his own body, a consciousness trapped behind unresponsive flesh, aware of every mechanical whisper and distant drip. But Dr. Aris's latest adjustments had introduced a new sensation, a faint, persistent scratching from within the walls that no one else acknowledged. Lead neurologist Aris Thorne, in his late 50s with an intense gaze, observed something deeply unsettling on the patient's scans. He methodically flipped between 2 images, one from the first week of the coma, and another from the third. The sterile air in the lab suddenly carried a faint, metallic scent, like cold iron. His breath hitched as the impossible data on the screen refused to align with any known medical precedent. He leaned in, his mind grappling with the impossible. The tumors, those massive, inoperable clusters that should have been devouring his defenseless body, were not spreading. Instead, they were shrinking, not incrementally, but dramatically. A cold, metallic scent hung in the air as the undeniable truth settled. Something far more terrifying than disease was at work. It was as if the cancer was retreating. Thorne summoned oncologist Dr. Lee, their hushed debate laced with bewildered dread. The sterile air grew thick with the scent of ozone and cold, metallic fear. Their whispered arguments scraped against the oppressive quiet, a sound more chilling than any scream. Dr. Lee, a seasoned oncologist, stared at the latest scans, his professional certainty crumbling into dust. The sterile scent of the lab now carried an unsettling metallic tang, like old iron, as he re-examined the impossible data. His breath hitched, not from the cold air of the examination room, but from a deep, primal dread. This type of sarcoma doesn't just shrink spontaneously. It was a medical impossibility, a silent defiance of every law he knew. Not like this. It's metabolically aggressive. It consumes. Consumes what? Thorne's words trailed off, his focus shifting from the IV line feeding John's veins to the glowing scan of the shrinking tumors. The sterile scent of antiseptic suddenly smelled metallic, like old blood. His gaze snapped between the shrinking mass on the screen and John's steady vitals. A terrible understanding crystallized. The nutrition wasn't bypassing the tumors. The tumors were feeding directly from the IV, growing stronger even as they appeared to shrink. His blood chemistry was all wrong, wildly abnormal. The answer lay in John's blood work. It showed sky-high levels of ketones, a chemical signature of profound metabolic distress. His catabolic enzymes were off the charts, a silent scream from within his own body. His body was in a state of extreme, desperate starvation, but not from lack of nutrients in the IV line. It was starving because it was burning fuel at an impossible, terrifying rate. The low, pulsing synth note underscores the horror as Dr. Chen's monitor readings spike into the red. A metallic scent of ozone hangs in the air, and the machinery emits a faint, high-frequency whine that prickles the skin. Thorne proposed a theory so grotesque it bordered on science fiction. John's catastrophic brain damage had tripped a primal survival switch, buried deep within his hypothalamus. It was a final, desperate protocol, a last stand. Starved of external sustenance, with his coma shutting down non-essential functions, his body identified the largest source of abnormal, rapidly dividing tissue within itself: the tumors. In his recorded medical log, Dr. Thorne's voice is a haunted whisper. It's autophagy on a monstrous scale, he states, the clinical term laced with horror. A faint, sickly sweet odor of decay permeates the audio. The body is literally digesting itself, but it's not targeting healthy muscle first, as it should. The organism was selectively devouring the tumorous tissue, weaponizing the cancer's own chaotic growth against itself. The malignant growths were being systematically dismantled and metabolized for fuel. A single tear traced a path down John Keller's gaunt temple as he lay motionless. For 60 days, his comatose body waged a silent, internal war of attrition. A silent, horrific feast unfolded within him. The very toxin that was destroying his body became the only fuel keeping his organs functioning. He was a closed ecosystem of self-cannibalism, a walking paradox of decay and survival. The medical team could only observe, their professional detachment shattered by a mixture of clinical horror and profound, unsettling awe. On day 61, the flat beep of the heart monitor faltered, then skipped again. A silent, alien spike of brainwave activity flashed across a neighboring screen. The sterile air grew thick with the sharp scent of ozone. Then, John's lifeless finger twitched against the stiff white sheet. John's consciousness surfaced through a haze of pain, his eyelids fluttering against sterile, blinding light. In the chair beside him, Sarah slept, her head resting on the hospital bed, exhaustion etched into her features. With immense effort, he moved a skeletal hand, just an inch, until his fingers brushed against a strand of her hair. Then, the scene dissolved, jumping forward through time and space. In the sterile light of the rehabilitation gym, John Keller, still gaunt and spectral, took his first unsteady step. The walker's metal frame shuddered with his fragile weight as Sarah watched, tears tracing silent paths down her smiling face. His children moved forward, their small arms wrapping around him with a tenderness that seemed to hold the very air in the room still. Against all odds, in that quiet, sunlit room, John Keller came back. The man who had vanished returned. Scans showed his tumors had shrunk by nearly 70%. His body had performed a miracle medicine could not, consuming itself in the process. The air grew thick with the scent of ozone and decay as something primal settled over the room. Alone in the sterile quiet, John studies his reflection, a hollowed-out man staring back. With trembling hands, he lifts the thin hospital gown, revealing a landscape of sunken flesh and silvery scars across his abdomen. The air carries the faint, metallic scent of antiseptic and old blood, a smell that now lives in his bones. This is the price of his miracle. A body saved, but a spirit fractured by the horror that remade him. But he is not whole. He does not dream of darkness, but of a constant, gnawing hunger. When he looks at his own body, he does not see a survivor. He sees a battlefield. John stands before a freshly dug grave, the scent of damp earth and decay hanging thick in the air. But laid atop the raw soil is a lavish feast, the rich aroma of roasted meats and spices clashing violently with the grave's rot. Later, at the family table, laughter rings hollow in his ears as he pushes food around his plate, his stomach knotting with a deep, unnameable dread. Every bite offered feels like a betrayal, the cheerful chatter around him growing distant, muffled by the cold, sticky fear now gripping his throat. He stares at the morsel impaled on his fork, the color draining from his face. His hand trembles as he lowers the utensil, the faint scent of iron and something earthy clinging to the air. All appetite vanishes. replaced by a cold, creeping dread that tightens his chest. He survived because his body committed an unspeakable act. So tell me, when you save yourself by consuming the monster within, what does that make you? How do you return to a dinner table, knowing in your very cells the metallic tang of your own flesh? The knowledge sits heavy in your bones, a permanent stain on your being. Each meal becomes a reminder of that primal, forbidden flavor.
If the veil stirred, subscribe and meet the next encounter.